What's going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. And hopefully you all are at least doing okay today. After that week 2 of the NFL season, I don't think there's any of us that are doing that great as it is, especially if you were hit with a ton of injuries like many fantasy owners were. So even though we've got a huge waiver wire video coming out later today, and it's taking a little bit of extra time, we just wanted to make sure the production was perfect on this one because there's going to be a ton of players on it. So taking a little bit of extra time with that, wanted to drop a different video in advance because everybody's waking up today frantic with their rosters, especially as we're hearing a lot of the news coming out. CMC is going to be out for a few weeks. Barkley's done for the year. Sutton's done for the year. We haven't heard anything about Mostert yet. On and on and on. There's lots of injuries all over the place right now. So I just want to take a step back, okay? Just talk you through this a little bit and kind of talk you down off of a cliff. I want to work through what we need to do as fantasy owners to get our teams in the right place, okay? Look at it this way. Worst case scenario, you're 0-2. So what? You can still make it to the playoffs. All you got to do is make it to the playoffs. That's my saying. Get me in the playoffs. Anything can happen. It doesn't matter if I'm the 1 seed, 6 seed, 8 seed, 4 seed, however big your league is, however many people make it into the playoffs. It doesn't matter, okay? You still have just as good a chance right now as anybody else. You've just got to put in the work and the extra time. But most importantly, number one, don't panic. That's right. That's going to be number one on our list today in terms of what we are doing after that chaotic week to set ourselves up for success. Don't panic, okay? Because if you panic, you're not going to be able to do what you need to do as a fantasy owner to get your team in the right place. Like I said, a lot of you are looking at your teams right now thinking, holy crap, this season's over, or how am I going to make the playoffs, or this is a disaster, whatever it may be. Deep breaths. Take a deep breath, take a second, and let's take a look at some other steps that we can do to still have a successful fantasy football season. Because what I want you to do is I don't want you to make any crazy trades. All right? There's a lot of you right now that are looking at other teams, wanting to make deals, wanting to wheel and deal. There's a lot of you that think that the only way you're going to be able to win this year is to make some trades. This is where people get themselves in an even deeper hole. Okay, this is where you get the shovel out and you keep digging down instead of digging to the side so you can make a little slope to walk on out. Keep digging deeper so you can't climb out. Because a lot of times I'll see people, for instance, let's take DeAndre Hopkins. Okay, let's say you're a DeAndre Hopkins owner right now. Okay, and you're looking at your team and you've had a lot of injuries. DeAndre Hopkins is your star, but you say to yourself, boy, you know what? I could trade this dollar and I could get 3/4 in a return. Okay, first off, that math doesn't make any sense, right? Don't do that. Don't trade your star player for a bunch of people that are role players, okay? Maybe you're thinking, I could get a wide receiver 2 out of this. So maybe I'm going to trade DeAndre Hopkins. Who could I get for him? And you start looking through the names of guys that, they're wide receiver 2s. They're second tier wide receivers. Maybe you say to yourself, maybe I can get DJ Chark and James White and David Johnson for DeAndre Hopkins. No. We're not doing that. Don't do that, okay? Because that's a mistake a lot of fantasy owners make. Because you think to yourself, if I trade my superstar for more depth, I'll be even across the board. Instead, you need to be working it other ways, okay? Because even though you add a little bit of depth to your team, you're taking away basically the same amount of weekly points, or maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, instead of just going through and working the waiver wire, which we'll talk about in a second. But another thing that I see a lot of fantasy owners do is you try to take advantage of those owners that have the injuries, like a Barkley or a CMC, okay? Be careful with that as well, okay? Should you go out and try to make a deal for one of those guys that's injured? Yeah, why not? But you have to be in the proper place to do so. Like maybe you're a team that has a ton of running back depth. Maybe you do go out and take a look at the CMC owner and say, hey, you're 0-2, I'm 2-0. I've got a little bit of depth. I could help you out. That's fine, okay? But don't trade players that could do well. Like, don't say, oh, I'm going to give up Derrick Henry and get CMC back. Don't do that. Okay? Don't sell low on Derrick Henry because you want to try and add CMC to your team. We don't know when CMC is even going to play again at this point. Yeah, maybe Derrick Henry hasn't given you all the touchdowns that you would have wanted to so far this season, but he's still seeing more than his fair share of volume. So be careful with that. Sometimes we get a little overzealous to try and add those players that have been injured because we think, oh, we want to take advantage of this person. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't send crappy trades either. All right. But like I said, we're not making any crazy trades right now because what we need to do is we need to check out the waiver wire first. Your most important task over the next 48 hours, 24 hours, whatever it is until your waivers run is digging in deep on who you can get, whether it be putting in waiver priorities, using your fab, whatever it may be. You need to set out a list of these are the guys that I am targeting. This is my number 1 priority. This is my number 2 priority. This is my number 3 priority. This is the position that I need the most help at. This is the second position I need the most help at. You got to sit down and you go through it, okay? Don't just go out there and say, I'm going to add this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, okay? Be prepared. Because the last thing you want to do is you want to go out and you want to take a run at Jerick McKinnon, but maybe maybe James Robinson, Jerick McKinnon, Darrell Henderson are available, and all of a sudden you put in a Dion Lewis, and Dion Lewis bumps up to the top because you've got all these waiver priorities in, and you didn't check and see who was where. And now you've got Dion Lewis, who could potentially be replaced by Devonta Freeman anytime soon. Well, like I said, I've got a big-time waiver wire episode coming out in a little bit. It's in production right now. It's going to be done later and ready for you tonight, so you can go through and get everybody that you need. But work the waiver wire. Try to replace some guys on your team right now. And kind of building off of that, when you're working the waiver wire, find standalone value, okay? Because a lot of time what owners will say is, hey, I had CMC, so I'm going to make Mike Davis my first priority. Why? Just because CMC was your guy doesn't mean you shouldn't make James Robinson your priority. James Robinson's a guy that's still going to see a ton of volume, but even on top of that, when CMC comes back, Mike Davis becomes irrelevant for you, right? So get guys with standalone value, because then when CMC comes back, then you've got James Robinson, who you can also play. All right? Same thing for the Bostard owners, okay? Maybe that's who you had. So you're thinking Jerick McKinnon, Tevin Coleman, those are my guys right now. Maybe that's not the best play for you. Maybe it's to find somebody with standalone value so that when those guys come back, Mostert, depending on how long he's out for, he's the guy that slips right back into your lineup. And again, you have a guy like James Robinson that you can put right onto your team, okay? That's what we want to be looking for now, those guys with standalone value. Now, if those guys are gone or you can't add those guys, then yeah, absolutely go for handcuffs at that point. Or if you're a team that you are looking good and maybe you don't have the first waiver priority and you know these guys are going to come off, then heck, throw a 10 waiver priority out there for a Mike Davis. Because maybe the CMC owner, maybe they went for some of these standalone values. They didn't get them. They missed out on Mike Davis because you get Mike Davis. Now you got yourself a decent little trade piece, okay? So also in the same sense, if your team's doing good, that doesn't mean don't work the waiver priority this week. Put yourself in a position to grab some of these guys that maybe you can work a deal for. Moving on, number 5, don't go drop crazy. All right? I saw it a couple of weeks ago. After week 1 of the NFL season, somebody said they got rid of Nick Chubb. What? Why? Don't do that. Don't do that, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go drop crazy. All right. If there's guys that you drafted that aren't injured, that you have faith in, you had a process that led you to believe they were going to be good fantasy producers this year. It's only week 2. There's a ton of injuries. This is going to allow for a lot of people to step up. Don't go drop crazy. Don't get rid of a bunch of guys just because you're like, man, I spent a 4th round draft pick on this guy. He's not working out. Let's go ahead and kick him to the curb. All right. Don't do that. Make sure you utilize your IR spots as well. Hopefully, a lot of leagues out there added some IR spots this season because of COVID potential issues. Now, we haven't had any of those. Excellent. But maybe you have some extra IR spots that you can utilize this year so you don't have to worry about it. Make sure you utilize those. All right? Don't go dropping people just because they might miss a few weeks. Be careful with that. I see that happen with fantasy owners as well. Take some of those guys and put them in your IR. Drew Lock, for instance, he's going to miss 2 to 6 weeks is kind of what the thought is right now. Some of you might say, I don't need Drew Lock. I'm going to go ahead and drop him. Why? If you have extra IR spots, just hold on to him. Now, if it comes to the point where you're having to pick and choose between IR spots, then maybe you move on from some of those guys. But for right now, utilize those IR spots. Don't go drop crazy. And make sure you hold on to a lot of the guys that, again, you put your faith in at the beginning of the season. So what's the point in bailing on them right now? Like an Allen Lazard. Maybe some of you are like, well, Allen Lazard hasn't looked as good as I would have hoped so far. And MVS is a guy that's looking really good right now. Big playability. Well, Devontae Adams is, potentially going to be missing some time as well. So you want both of those guys. Okay, so don't get rid of Allen Lazard, other guys in that same situation. There are some positions that you don't need to worry about, though, and we're going to punt those positions. And no, not punters, but we're going to punt the positions of defensive special teams, quarterbacks, kickers, tight ends, all of those. Because right now what we really need to do is we need to build depth at the running back and wide receiver positions. So those of you that play in a single quarterback league, you don't need a backup quarterback right now, okay? Drop your backup quarterback if you've got a really good starting quarterback, and then just wait until their bye week and stream somebody. Same thing for defensive special teams. Same thing for kickers. You don't need backup defensive special teams. You don't need backup kickers. Don't worry about those guys. Get rid of them. When your bye week comes up, stream somebody. Worry about it then. And in this instance, too, if you have a really good kicker or really good D special teams, when it comes your week, and here's just a little bit of inside knowledge for you, a little bit of trick of the trade. When it comes to your week, wait until the very last second to drop somebody. Sunday morning, 20 minutes before kickoff, drop somebody, because whoever you drop is going to lock, and they will not go back through until waivers run later the next week. So if you really want to get that person back, drop them. Nobody else is going to use a waiver wire on a kicker or a defensive special teams, and then just pick them up again, right? So just do that. Just wait until the last minute, drop them, have them locked so nobody else can pick them up, and then they're yours again after that. Tight end as well. We've seen some injuries at the tight end position, but if you have a really good tight end, don't worry about getting one right now, okay? Go ahead and drop them. I've seen a lot of you ask questions about what tight end should I start this week, and you own like 3 different tight ends. You don't need to worry about that right now. You don't need that many tight ends. If you really want to keep 2, okay, keep 2. You don't need 3. If you have a really good tight end, if you have a Jared Cook, a Hunter Henry, an Evan Ingram, Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, those guys that are considered top tier guys, even Jonnu Smith, who I absolutely love, you don't need to be holding on to like a Mike Gesicki, right? You don't need to be holding on to him. You don't need to be holding on to a Logan Thomas. You don't need to be holding on to a Mo Alley Cox or anything like that. You just need to worry about your one tight end right now, okay? We should be worried about building depth at running back and wide receiver. Okay, so don't go drop crazy dropping other running backs and wide receivers to add more running backs and wide receivers. Get rid of some of these other positions you're never going to use or you're not going to have to worry about on a weekly basis until you have to stream them. That should be your top priority right now. And that is why those are some tips that you really need to keep in mind is you're kind of dealing with all of the fallout from yesterday. More information is going to continue to come out. There's going to be more guys missing time. There's going to be some more devastating injuries. We're only in week 2. We're not going to get through the rest of the year with no injuries whatsoever. So we got to prepare ourselves right now. So we got to work the waiver wire, and we got to get ready to bolster up our team. And then after waiver wires run, then we'll talk a little bit more about trades, okay? If you don't necessarily get the help you need, then at that point we'll look at making some moves. But for right now, it makes no sense to go crazy and start making a bunch of different trades because you feel your team is going to be left in the dust, all right? We have time. Settle in. Everything's going to be just fine, all right? So again, just wanted to put together this quick video for you to kind of help just calm the nerves a little bit. Fantasy owners, it's not done yet. It's only week 2. We have a ton of time. Make sure that you turn on those notifications because that waiver wire video is going to be out in a little bit. And then you'll see everybody that I'm targeting on waivers this week. But do me a favor, Headliner Nation, we're over 100,000 strong now, but that doesn't matter. The drive still continues for even higher numbers. So hit that subscribe button, become a part of Headliner Nation today. Make sure you leave a comment down below for maybe something that you're doing or some tips that you have for other fantasy owners that are struggling through today as well. And then, of course, if you appreciate the content, hit that like button and stick around for more great content here from the Fantasy Headliners. Thanks so much, Headliner Nation. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully everybody is safe and healthy. Hopefully you guys made it through without experiencing too many injuries this past weekend, and we'll get you ready for week 3 right here on the Fantasy Headliners, and I'll see you on the next episode.